On a sweltering July night in 1916, a man in pajamas rushed through the streets of Cleveland, carrying what looked like alien headgear in his arms. Garrett Augustus Morgan didn't know it yet, but this moment would finally reveal to the world the true identity behind one of the most life-saving inventions of the early 20th century, the gas mask, the son of slaves who dreamed beyond his station born. On March 4, 1877, in Paris, Kentucky, Garrett Morgan entered a world that offered little promise to a black child. He was the seventh of 11 children born to Sidney and Elizabeth Reed Morgan, both formerly enslaved people who had gained their freedom just 14 years earlier. His father, Sidney, was the son of Confederate Colonel John Hunt Morgan, a heritage that would create complex questions of identity throughout Garrett's life. Elizabeth Reed, Garrett's mother, carried the blood of three peoples, African, Native American, and white ancestry, that traced back to a Baptist minister. This mixed heritage would later prove both a burden and an unexpected asset as Garrett navigated the treacherous waters of American business in the age of segregation. The family farm in rural Kentucky provided subsistence but little opportunity for advancement. Young Garrett possessed an insatiable hunger for learning that his rural Kentucky surroundings couldn't satisfy. The one-room schoolhouse offered only elementary education, and Garrett's brilliant mind yearned for more complex challenges. At 14, with only a basic education under his belt, he made a decision that would change his life forever. He left home for Cincinnati, carrying nothing but determination and an unshakable belief in his own potential. The journey from Kentucky to Ohio represented more than geographic movement. It was a leap from agricultural servitude toward industrial possibility. Young Morgan understood intuitively that America's rapidly mechanizing cities held opportunities that rural farming could never provide. His decision to leave home at such a young age demonstrated the fierce independence and calculated risk-taking that would characterize his entire career. From handyman to visionary in Cincinnati, Morgan found work as a handyman for a wealthy landowner, earning modest wages but gaining invaluable exposure to urban life and industrial mechanisms. However, his true education began when he discovered the city's sewing machine factories. These industrial temples, with their intricate gears, pulleys, and precision engineering, fascinated the young man. The complex interplay of mechanical components sparked an inventive genius that had been lying dormant in the Kentucky countryside. Understanding that education would be his pathway to success, Morgan used his meager earnings to hire a private tutor. While his peers spent their free time in recreation, Morgan devoted every spare moment to learning mathematics, reading, and understanding the principles of mechanical engineering. This self-directed education, driven by an almost desperate hunger for knowledge, laid the foundation for all his future innovations. 4 years later, in 1895, Morgan moved to Cleveland, where he took a humble position sweeping floors at the Roots and McBride Company, a sewing machine manufacturer. But Morgan refused to remain invisible or accept the limitations others placed on him. He studied the sewing machines around him with the intensity of a scholar, teaching himself not just to operate them, but to understand their every component. His mechanical aptitude and obvious intelligence soon caught the attention of his supervisors, who promoted him from janitor to machinist. This promotion represented a significant breakthrough for a young black man in 1890s America. The skilled trades were largely closed to African Americans, and Morgan's advancement demonstrated both his exceptional talent and his ability to navigate racial barriers through sheer competence. His first invention emerged from this environment, a belt fastener for sewing machines that improved their efficiency. Building an empire through innovation. By 1907, Morgan had saved enough money to open his own sewing machine repair business, demonstrating the entrepreneurial spirit that would drive his entire career. 2 years later, he launched the Morgan Skirt Factory with his wife Mary, establishing himself as both inventor and businessman. Their interracial marriage, Garrett was black, Mary was white, caused tremendous controversy in early 1900s Cleveland, a city still deeply divided by racial prejudice. Mary's own father had her excommunicated from the Catholic Church for marrying a black man, while Garrett's former employer gave him an ultimatum: end the relationship or lose his job. Morgan chose love over security, quitting his position and striking out on his own. This decision revealed the moral courage that would later drive him to risk his life saving others in toxic environments. The Morgan skirt factory prospered despite the social hostility surrounding their marriage, eventually employing 32 workers and establishing Garrett as one of Cleveland's most successful African-American entrepreneurs. But it was while experimenting with a liquid for polishing sewing machine needles that Morgan stumbled upon his first major commercial success. The solution prevented needles from burning fabric as they sewed, but Morgan discovered it had an unexpected side effect. It could straighten hair. This accidental discovery led to the establishment of the G.A. Morgan Hair Refining Company, providing the capital that would fund his future inventions. Morgan's hair straightening cream became wildly popular in the African-American community, generating the financial resources he would need to pursue his more ambitious technological visions. The irony was not lost on Morgan that his pathway to inventing life-saving devices began with a beauty product that helped Black Americans conform to white standards of appearance. The fire that changed. Everything on March 25, 1911, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York City claimed 146 lives, mostly young immigrant women who were trapped in a burning building with locked exits. The horrific images of firefighters struggling against thick smoke, unable to reach victims trapped on the upper floors, haunted Morgan's imagination. He understood that the firefighters' inability to breathe in smoke-filled environments had prevented them from saving more lives. The Triangle fire exposed the fundamental inadequacy of existing safety equipment. Traditional oxygen masks were heavy, cumbersome, and frequently failed in extreme conditions. Morgan realized that what firefighters needed was not more oxygen, but a way to access the cleaner air that naturally existed in every burning building. Down near the floor, Morgan began sketching designs for a breathing device that could allow firefighters to enter toxic environments safely. His concept was revolutionary: a canvas hood that would be placed over the head, connected to tubes that would draw fresh air from near the floor while expelling contaminated air through separate channels. The device relied on the scientific principle that toxic gases and smoke rise due to heat, leaving cleaner air near ground level. The science behind the genius Morgan's understanding of fluid dynamics and thermal principles was largely self-taught but remarkably sophisticated. He recognized that carbon monoxide, the deadly component of smoke that claimed most fire victims, tends to linger at roughly the level of a standing person's head, whereas cleaner air hovers closer to the feet. This insight became the foundation for his revolutionary design. The safety hood featured a long tube that hung near the ground like a tail, diverging at tailbone level into two hoses that snaked up either side of the wearer's ribcage and below the underarms. These tubes finally entered the mask, a hood, resembling a beekeeper's helmet, providing clean air to the wearer while separate exhaust valves expelled contaminated air. The device incorporated several innovative features that distinguished it from existing equipment. A moist sponge filtered out smoke particles and cooled the incoming air, while the dual-tube system ensured continuous airflow even if one tube became blocked. The design was elegantly simple yet scientifically sound, embodying Morgan's genius for creating practical solutions to complex problems. In 1912, Morgan filed for a patent on his breathing device, officially described as a safety hood designed to enable a firefighter to supply himself at will with fresh air from near the floor and at the same time forcibly remove smoke or injurious gases from the air tube. The patent application demonstrated Morgan's thorough understanding of the technical principles underlying his invention. The cruel reality of American racism. The patent was granted on October 13, 1914, and Morgan established the National Safety Device Company to manufacture and sell his invention. However, he immediately confronted the brutal reality of American racism. Fire chiefs across the country, particularly in the South, refused to purchase equipment invented by a black man, regardless of its life-saving potential. The discrimination was so pervasive and systematic that Morgan was forced to develop elaborate schemes to hide his identity. He enlisted white actors to portray him at firefighter conventions and trade shows, while he demonstrated the actual effectiveness of the device. The white actors would take credit as the inventor, while Morgan, disguised as a Native American assistant named Big Chief Mason, would perform the dangerous demonstrations. This deception required Morgan to claim he was a full-blooded Native American from the Walpole Island Indian Reserve in Canada. The elaborate charade reflected both Morgan's determination to save lives and the vicious racism that forced him to deny his true identity to market his own invention. During these demonstrations, Morgan would enter smoke-filled tents wearing his safety hood, remaining in toxic atmosphere for up to 20 minutes while audiences watched in amazement. He would build noxious fires fueled by tar, sulfur, formaldehyde, and manure inside enclosed tents, creating conditions that would quickly kill an unprotected person. The New Orleans Times-Picayune reported on one such demonstration in 1914, describing how Big Chief Mason lingered in smoke thick enough to strangle an elephant for a full 20 minutes and emerged as good as new. Marketing genius. Born of necessity, the elaborate charade worked remarkably well. Morgan's company letterhead featured the names of prominent white Cleveland businessmen as executives, creating the illusion that the National Safety Device Company was white-owned. Between 1914 and 1916, the company's stock price soared from $10 to $250 per share, demonstrating the commercial viability of Morgan's invention once racial barriers were circumvented. Even the famous financier J.P. Morgan, no relation to Garrett, provided advice on navigating racial prejudice in business. When Garrett Morgan sought his counsel, J.P. Morgan suggested removing his first name from the product entirely, marketing it simply as the Morgan Safety Hood to obscure its black inventor's identity. This strategy of racial ambiguity became central to Morgan's marketing approach. The success of these deceptive marketing strategies revealed both Morgan's business acumen and the tragic necessity of hiding his race to save lives. Fire departments across the country began purchasing the safety hoods, and Morgan's invention won a gold medal from the International Association of Fire Chiefs, confirming its technical superiority over existing equipment. The night that changed history, at 11:30 p.m. on July 24, 1916, a massive explosion ripped through the Cleveland Waterworks Tunnel, situated 128 feet beneath Lake Erie and extending 4 miles from shore. The tunnel, part of the city's water supply system, had been under construction when natural gas ignited in a catastrophic blast, trapping dozens of workers in a toxic cloud of smoke, dust, and poisonous gases. The explosion was so powerful that it could be felt throughout Cleveland, shattering windows and causing panic across the city. Rescue attempts began immediately, but the toxic atmosphere inside the tunnel proved deadlier than the initial explosion. 2 separate rescue teams entered the tunnel, only to collapse from gas inhalation themselves. Of the first 18 people to enter the tunnel, both trapped workers and would-be rescuers, 11 died from toxic gas exposure. As hours passed with no successful rescue, the situation seemed hopeless. Traditional rescue equipment proved utterly inadequate against the toxic environment. It was then that someone remembered seeing a demonstration of Morgan's safety hood at a fire convention. A desperate message was dispatched to Morgan's home at 5202 Harlem Avenue in the middle of the night, the moment of truth. Morgan was roused from his sleep around 3 a.m. and told that his invention was needed for a real-life rescue operation. Without hesitation, he gathered his brother Frank and 4 of his safety hoods, arriving at the disaster site still wearing his pajamas. The image of the inventor rushing through Cleveland's dark streets in his nightclothes, carrying the devices that might save lives, captured the urgency of the moment. The gathered rescue workers and city officials were skeptical of the strange-looking device and the black man who claimed it could save lives. Traditional rescue equipment had already failed catastrophically, claiming multiple lives. The crowd included Cleveland's fire chief, police officials, and concerned family members of the trapped workers. Many questioned whether this untested invention could succeed where professional rescue equipment had failed. Morgan didn't waste time arguing or explaining the technical principles behind his device. He simply strapped on his safety hood and descended into the toxic tunnel with his brother Frank and 2 volunteers, demonstrating the same courage he had shown in countless sales demonstrations. The difference was that this time real lives hung in the balance, and failure could mean his own death. Heroes in the depths, what followed was nothing short of miraculous. Morgan and his team entered the tunnel that had already claimed 11 lives, breathing safely through their hoods while navigating by feel through the poisonous darkness. They made multiple trips into the deadly environment, each journey requiring them to trust completely in Morgan's invention. On their first descent, the team discovered several unconscious workers and began the dangerous process of bringing them to the surface. The safety hoods allowed them to work methodically in conditions that would have killed them within minutes. One by one, they carried survivors to safety, proving definitively that Morgan's invention functioned exactly as designed. The rescue operation lasted for hours, with Morgan's team making repeated journeys into the toxic tunnel. When dawn broke over Lake Erie, they had successfully rescued several survivors who would certainly have died without intervention. They also recovered the bodies of those who had perished in the initial explosion, providing closure for grieving families. The effectiveness of Morgan's invention was undeniable, witnessed by city officials, reporters, and hundreds of concerned citizens. For the first time, the true inventor's identity was public knowledge, and his heroism was undeniable. The bitter taste of recognition, the tunnel rescue should have been Morgan's moment of triumph, launching him to national prominence and securing his place in American history. However, the aftermath revealed the deep persistence of American racism, even in the face of undeniable heroism. While some newspapers praised the rescue effort, many failed to mention Morgan's crucial role at all. The Monitor, Cleveland's African-American newspaper, centered Morgan in their coverage, providing detailed accounts of his heroism and the technical success of his invention. However, mainstream white newspapers often omitted his name entirely, crediting the rescue to unnamed volunteers or focusing exclusively on the white participants. This deliberate erasure reflected the systematic exclusion of black achievements from American historical narrative. Most painfully, when the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission reviewed the rescue for their prestigious award in 1917, Morgan was passed over due to his race. The commission, established to recognize civilian heroism, instead honored a far more minor act of heroism that year, demonstrating that even life-saving bravery could not overcome the color barrier in American society. The city of Cleveland did award Morgan and his brother gold medals for their heroism, but national recognition remained elusive. From Cleveland to the Western Front, despite the mixed response to his heroism, the technical success of the tunnel rescue could not be ignored. Fire departments across the country finally began purchasing Morgan's safety hoods in large numbers, recognizing their proven effectiveness under extreme conditions. As World War I engulfed Europe, Morgan's invention took on global significance. The German army's use of chlorine gas at the Second Battle of Ypres in April 1915 had caught Allied forces completely unprepared, resulting in thousands of casualties from chemical weapons. The terrifying effectiveness of gas warfare created urgent demand for protective equipment that could keep soldiers alive in contaminated environments. Military officials recognized that Morgan's safety hood, with modifications for battlefield conditions, could protect soldiers from gas attacks. The U.S. Army adopted a refined version of Morgan's design for use by American troops, incorporating lessons learned from European battlefield experience. Later models incorporated an airbag that could hold about 15 minutes of fresh air, providing additional safety margin in combat situations. In 1918, the Denver Star reported that Morgan had received a substantial order for safety hoods from the U.S. Navy, for warships still under construction. The military applications of his invention extended beyond infantry protection to include naval personnel working in confined spaces where toxic gases might accumulate. The scientific legacy recognized. Irony was profound and bitter. A device invented by a black American who faced daily discrimination was now protecting the lives of soldiers fighting for democracy overseas. Morgan's invention had evolved from a firefighter's tool into crucial military equipment that would save countless lives on the battlefields of France and Belgium. Modern historians and scientists have recognized that Morgan's contribution to gas mask technology was fundamental and groundbreaking. For decades, credit for the first effective gas mask was incorrectly attributed to British scientist John Scott Haldane, who began his research in 1915, a full year after Morgan had already received his patent. The Smithsonian Magazine issued a significant correction in 2022, acknowledging that Garrett Morgan, a black inventor based in Ohio, filed a patent for a gas mask in 1914, a year before Haldane started researching his device. This correction represented an important step in recognizing the true origins of technology that saved millions of lives during World War I and continues to protect people today. Morgan's design principles, drawing clean air from ground level while expelling contaminated air through separate channels, became the foundation for all subsequent gas mask development. Every modern respirator, from firefighter equipment to military gas masks, incorporates the basic concepts that Morgan pioneered in his Cleveland workshop. Beyond the gas mask, a Renaissance inventor, while Morgan's safety hood was his most famous invention, his creative genius extended far beyond respiratory protection. His mind constantly sought solutions to everyday problems, leading to innovations in multiple fields. In the early 1920s, after witnessing a collision between an automobile and horse-drawn cart that resulted in a young girl's injury and a horse's death, Morgan turned his attention to traffic safety. The accident occurred at a particularly problematic Cleveland intersection where vehicles, horses and pedestrians competed for space without clear guidance. Existing traffic control systems consisted mainly of manually operated signals that required constant human intervention and often failed to provide adequate warning to approaching traffic. Morgan invented an improved traffic signal with 3 positions, stop-go, and a crucial warning position that allowed traffic to clear intersections safely before cross-traffic began moving. This innovation was revolutionary because it provided drivers time to react, preventing the sudden transitions from green to red that caused many accidents. With existing 2-position systems, his traffic signal design was so effective that Morgan sold the patent to General Electric for $40,000, approximately $600,000 in today's money. General Electric installed his 3-armed signals in cities across the country, making Morgan's invention a standard feature of American urban life. The modern traffic light system still incorporates Morgan's crucial insight about the necessity of warning intervals. Media pioneer and civil rights. Activist Morgan's entrepreneurial vision extended beyond invention into media and civil rights activism. In 1920, he founded the Cleveland Call, a weekly newspaper serving the African American community, understanding that media representation was crucial for civil rights progress. The newspaper provided coverage of African American affairs that was ignored by white-owned publications, creating a vital communication network within Cleveland's black community. He was also a co-founder of the Cleveland Association of Colored Men, working to organize political and economic power within the black community. Morgan understood that individual success, no matter how spectacular, meant little without collective advancement. His activism demonstrated the same systematic thinking he applied to his inventions, identifying problems and developing comprehensive solutions. The final innovations Morgan's inventive spirit never dimmed, even as he aged. Despite poor health in his later years, he continued working on new concepts and improvements to existing devices. His last invention was a self-extinguishing cigarette that featured a water-filled plastic pellet placed just before the filter. This innovation anticipated growing awareness of smoking's health dangers and demonstrated Morgan's lifelong commitment to safety innovation. Throughout his career, Morgan maintained his childhood workshop mentality, constantly tinkering, improving, and seeking better solutions to practical problems. He worked on everything from hat fastenings to belt buckles to automotive components, always looking for ways to make everyday life safer and more efficient. The lasting impact. Garrett Morgan died on July 27, 1963, at the age of 86, living just long enough to witness the early days of the civil rights movement that would finally begin to dismantle the legal segregation he had spent his life circumventing. He had earned the title he gave himself, the Black Edison, though his achievements arguably surpassed even that comparison. His safety hood invention evolved into the modern gas masks used by firefighters, military personnel, and industrial workers around the world. Every person who has been protected from toxic gases, smoke, or chemical weapons owes a debt to the genius of a high, formerly enslaved man's son who refused to accept the limitations society placed on him. The Federal Highway Administration honors Morgan's contributions through programs like the Garrett A. Morgan Transportation Technology Education Program, which helps K-12 students in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics become tomorrow's transportation professionals. This educational legacy ensures that Morgan's spirit of innovation continues inspiring new generations. Morgan's story illuminates both the tremendous contributions of African-American inventors and the cruel barriers they faced in a segregated society. His willingness to hide his identity, adopt disguises, and work through white intermediaries reveals the extraordinary lengths Black entrepreneurs had to employ to bring their innovations to market and to save lives. The tunnel rescue of 1916 stands as a powerful metaphor for Morgan's entire life, entering dangerous, toxic environments to save others, emerging with proof that his vision could preserve life itself. In that moment, wearing his pajamas and his revolutionary breathing device, Garrett Morgan stepped out of the shadows of anonymity and into history as one of America's greatest inventors. Today, as we face new challenges requiring innovation and courage, Morgan's legacy reminds us that genius knows no racial boundaries, and that the most important inventions often come from those who understand suffering intimately. His hidden genius, finally revealed and properly credited, continues to save lives more than a century after he first sketched designs for a device that would allow human beings to breathe safely in the most dangerous places on Earth.